Take the critics and your fear. There's no easy way to hear. And all the memories you love to bring. With all the things that you hate to scream. So tell me, hollow on the inside. There's no trying to hide from this monster inside me. So if you try to criticize me, like the world defines me, image of what I have become.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the most anticipated podcast since the end of the season. I am one half of your co-host. My name is Tristan. I'm here with my man Derek. We are, of course, the Browns Beat Podcast. Derek, it happened. It finally happened. The Cleveland Browns have hired their next head coach. It is Todd Monken. We're going to get into all of that in just a moment, but first, I got to start. Derek, how you feeling, man? How you doing?
Oh man, it's one of those things where it's like, where do you even begin? You know. So let me start with this, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the nightmare scenario. And I know that sounds it's a crazy thing to say, and I want to give a few quick points right off the bat before we get into it. These are things we're going to talk about. Jim Schwartz walked into the Cleveland Browns facility with a box, got his stuff, and left. That is a fact. That is not an opinion. And this is not coming from me. This is not Derek Frisbee telling you this. This is Ken Carman. And if there's anybody on God's green earth that you can trust, it's Ken Carman. Deshaun Watson is officially back in play for quarterback as the Cleveland Browns. The process was an absolute disaster. It was an embarrassment. This has been one of the most just hard to wrap your head around things, Tristan. There's so much to get into with this, but I'll start with this. You know, you often wonder how teams continue to be so bad for so long. You know, and there's the obvious ones that come to your head, right? Tristan looked it up right before we hit record tonight. The Cleveland Browns have been over 500 4 times in my life. 4 times. So before we get into this, before we talk about any of this, I just want to clarify everything that I'm saying, everything that I say, everything that Tristan's going to say, it comes from a place of that. 23 years old, 4 times have the Cleveland Browns been over 500. So, you know, I know there's going to be a lot of people who will watch this and, you know, they'll have their various opinions and you'll think whatever you'll think. But I want to ask the question, where do you draw the line? At what point do you draw the line? So, Tristan, before I send it over you, no. I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm not going to try to convince myself. I'm not going to pretend that this is anything other than what it is. And what it is a disaster. This hiring process, this hire, and Tristan, in my opinion, the next 2 years minimum of being a Cleveland Browns fan will be a disaster. So, obviously, we're going to get into all of that, but you know, if I had to leave you with one positive before I send it over to you, Tristan, Jeremiah Smith may be in play now. Maybe in play now. As long as the Browns still have their first-round draft pick, could be a possibility now. So, Tristan, what do you think?
So you're saying there's a chance? No. On a real, you know, before I get into this, right? In regards to your introduction, for those who are sitting on both sides of this fence, we are going to go through both positives and negatives in this podcast. It's not going to be a 2-hour long roast of the Cleveland Browns. We absolutely could do that. 100%. Double that. 4 hours. We could do that, right? We could. But with this process, we're going to talk about the positives and negatives, because trust me, there are a lot of things that can go on each side, and we're gonna dive into this as objectively as possible, but at the same time, we're fans, so we're gonna give you our emotional opinion. So Derek, if you were to ask me like what I thought of the Todd Monken hire, I would have to tell you what my initial thoughts were, and kind of like how I've kind of progressed in my thought process as time has gone on. I think that a lot of us, Derek, kind of, if the general consensus, the general group of people were like me, I didn't pay close enough attention to the fact that Todd Monken got a second interview. I didn't do that. I just kind of assumed like that was part of their process, because they gave quite a few guys second interviews. And so I kind of just overlooked it. And so that's why when it was announced he was hired, I didn't see it coming. And all I had known about Todd Monken was his time here in 2019 with Freddie Kitchens, which I'm sure that's probably something we're going to get into. I knew that he had a playoff game with Baltimore where he didn't give Derrick Henry the ball enough, and it cost him a game. I think that was it was against the Bills, I want to say, in a divisional round game, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember what year, but it was within recent memory. And I also knew that he called plays for Georgia and won back-to-back national championships with them. That's all I knew, Derek, and outside of his age as well. And so when I looked at those things, my first thought was just why? Like, I didn't get it. It was hard to stomach the thought process behind it. And so that initial reaction was just like, this just doesn't make sense. Why would you go for Todd Monken? Kind of as time has gone on, I there's part of me that has grown to like the hire. I hate the process. Let me start that first and foremost. The process that has gone on with this hire was just horrible. It was horrible, and we're gonna get into that. But the hire itself, I can understand, and I can get myself behind it, and I could honestly convince myself, and I think that there's objective truth into liking what you're bringing into the building with Todd Monken. There are things that you can like. With that being said, there's a lot that surrounds this hire, and we touched on it. Jim Schwartz. I'm not going to get too deep into it right now, because I know that we're going to get to that point. And I want to keep it just Todd Monken right now. So for me, where I stand today is this. The process of hiring Todd Monken deserves all of the scrutiny in the world. It deserves all of the questions to be asked to the organization, and how they went about especially Jim Schwartz's role in the negotiations with the head coach, and pretty much telling candidates that they would like Jim Schwartz to remain as the DC. That is separate from the hire. And one thing I want to make abundantly clear is whether or not you think that Todd Monken was the right hire, or that he's a good hire. This is somebody who his resume is well fitting to become a head coach. He has been coaching football for a very, very, very long time. He has done an excellent job coaching, specifically offensive football. And he has a really good resume when it comes to being an offensive coordinator. You can look back at his time with Southern, I believe it's Southern Missouri or Southern Mississippi, one of the two. I always mess them up. But took over a team that went, I believe it was 0-12, and his last year there won the I'm forgetting the conference name, but he won the Coach of the Year award in that conference. Went, I believe it was 9-5, I want to say something like that. But did well as a head coach. That was really the only head coaching experience he had. So when we look at him as an offensive coordinator or play caller, prior to Cleveland, he was in Tampa Bay, and he did a really good job there in terms of stats-wise. Comes to Cleveland, Freddie Kitchens is a play caller. Bit of a nightmare, right? We can delve deeper into that if you'd like.
I was going to say, to call it a bit of a nightmare?
Yeah,
man.
Yeah. I am aware. Trust me, I am aware. But the part that I want to get into the most is what he's been doing in recent years, which is after the Browns, since the Browns. What has he been doing? He went to Georgia, and he was... Kirby Smart has talked so glowingly about Todd Monken and his ability to elevate the players within his system and willing to adjust his scheme to get the most out of those players. Stetson Bennett was a fantastic college quarterback under Todd Monken. Quite literally looked like an actual NFL prospect because of Todd Monken. No offense to Stetson Bennett. Fantastic college quarterback. Just there's different levels to it. But he had him playing that well. And with that also included, Derek, I'm sure you remember, Georgia beating Ohio State on their path to college national championship. And those offenses were spectacular. And pre-Todd Monken, they weren't able to get to that level. And post-Todd Monken, they have not been able to get to that level. And for a program as big as Georgia, that's saying something, because they've got access to the resources to continuously be in that conversation. And they haven't been able to do it since. After Georgia, he took the job as the Ravens offensive coordinator. And this is where I do have some stats to read for you. Unless before I get into this, Derek, did you want to comment on anything that I've talked about? I've been kind of rambling for a bit. I'll give you the chance to rebuttal before I get into Todd Monken's time with the Ravens.
As far as everything you just said, I will comment on the Georgia situation real fast. That is, when it comes, because here's the thing. If you're listening to this still, I started this thing pretty aggressively negative, all right? And I want to clarify, none of this is Todd Monken's fault. Like, I'm not mad at Todd Monken. I'm not mad. I think he seems like a great dude. Like you said, you cannot say he's a bad coach. You can't. You can't say he's a good head coach. We don't know. But you can't say he's a bad coach overall, right? So when you're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs and that whole situation, first of all, one of those national championships, you beat TCU, so it's like, whatever. But like you said, you beat Ohio State to get there, and that is the point that is kind of important here, because like you said, Georgia is, for those of you who don't pay attention to college football, Georgia has been an elite defensive program for a long, long time. If you don't believe me, look at the Philadelphia Eagles roster and look at where half of their defensive players came from. But their offense, like you said, has been very, very slow, I guess. Like it's kind of stagnant. It's been almost like a bit of an anchor. And like you mentioned, Todd Monken gets there as offensive coordinator, takes a 0-star walk-on Stetson Bennett to winning 2 national championships. So quickly commenting on the college side of it, I can't speak to his time as head coach, but I can tell you very closely I remember his time at Georgia, and I know a lot of the Georgia fans, shout out to Uncle Lou on YouTube here, a lot of the Georgia fan base was very happy with Todd Monken, because all of a sudden you go from, kind of stagnant, little to nothing, to all of a sudden, wow, we have an offense. So yes, I want to give the kind of clarity and the credit. What he did going from the Cleveland Browns shithole to the Georgia Bulldogs, and essentially making them kind of a mini dynasty there for a while when you factor in the playoffs and making the national championship and winning 2 national championships back to back. And if you don't think that's hard, ask Ryan Day, ask Julian Sain, ask the crew here in Columbus. So 100%, his college career It is different. We'll talk about that. But as far as the resume goes, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned the Georgia fans were happy with him. So are the Ravens fans. A lot of the Ravens fans that I respect, personalities close to this team. In particular, one that I like to tune into occasionally, Engraven, very popular YouTuber for the Ravens. He talked about the fact that of all the big coaches in the Baltimore organization, he was the one that the fans wanted out the least. First and foremost was the DC Zach Orr. Then it was John Harbaugh. Then it was Todd Monken. They really liked Todd Monken and his ability to coach a really good offense. And yes, there's that criticism about that playoff game with Derrick Henry. You're gonna get that with any play caller ever. You're going to get that. If you really look back, the 28-3 collapse that the Patriots and Falcons game, there's probably a lot of people that could have looked at that and ripped Kyle Shanahan a new one, but he still ended up being a great coach. It happens. But let me go back to why the Ravens fans were happy with Todd Monken. And so the following stats are going to be from 2022 to 2025 seasons. The 2022 season was the year prior to Todd Monken joining the Ravens. 23, 24, and 25 were during his tenure for the following offensive stats categories. So total points in the NFL in 2022, again, without Todd Monken, the Ravens were at 19th. That was under Greg Roman. Todd Monken's first year in total points in 2023, the Ravens were 4th. The following year, 2024, they were 3rd in total points across the NFL. Across all 32 NFL teams. I should preface with that. 2025, it dipped to 11th. Now, there's a significant precursor there. Lamar Jackson was hurt for half the year. Like, that brother could not get away from injuries. Total yards. 2022, they were 16th. 2023, they were 6th. And in 2024, they were 1st across all 32 NFL teams. Last year, finished 16th. Of course, again, losing your franchise quarterback has a lot to do with that. But let's talk about rushing, because in particular with this team, we know how important it is to run the ball and do that effectively in this division to win it. Total rush yards per game. This I thought was really interesting, Derek. So in 2022, rush yards per game, it was about 160. Again, this is the Greg Roman offense. In 23, it dipped slightly, 156.5. 24, 187.6. Crazy. And then 25, 156.6. So, great numbers again, right? Rush yards per attempt. 22 was 5.2 yards, 23, 4.9, 24, 5.8, 25, 5.3. Again, really effective per rush basis. Total yards basis is good as well in terms of per game. Now let's look at passing. Net pass yards per game. And this, I feel like, especially during the 23-24 season, was the biggest change between the Greg Roman offense and the Todd Monken offense. In 2022, the average pass yards per game for the Ravens, 178.8 yards per game. 23, 213.8. 24, 237.4. Then, of course, last year, 175.6. But again, we saw the Snoop Huntley experience. You can understand why. No offense to him. He won game. He won a very big game for us at quarterback. So shout out to you, Snoop. In terms of per pass attempt, yards per pass attempt, this is the biggest indicator, the biggest precursor. And when you look into Todd Monken's philosophy, just the overall what we could look and what we could expect from our passing game. So in 22, per pass attempt, it was 6.6 yards for the Ravens. 23, it jumped up to 7.9. 24, 8.8. And then this last season, 7.8. Now, the reason for those statistics is to understand why Todd Monken was hired by the Ravens and what he added. So the Ravens prior to Todd were a good running game. We're a good run team. very good run team under Greg Roman. The issue was they could not get anything done in the passing game. And with Todd Monken, that did jump significantly. Lamar Jackson won an MVP. His best passing statistics as a quarterback came under Todd Monken. Really impressive season. And on top of that, the yards per attempt is the big one. They're getting more yards per attempt because there's a huge emphasis with Todd Monken on explosive plays. This is somebody who wants to draw up plays that are going to give you 20 plus yards on that given play. The Browns, Nathan Zagura, did a really good deep dive into a play that they ran against Pittsburgh that gave Zay Flowers a touchdown. The play design itself was just genius. There's no other way to put it. He schemed up a touchdown against Mike Tomlin, which not a lot of guys can do with great success. Yeah, fantastic play call, but I highly recommend everybody go look at it. The point is, I get why the Browns made this hire, and I get why it was the right decision. Todd Monken is somebody who has been overlooked as a head coaching candidate for a very, very long time. He is also somebody who I think, given his track record, deserved an opportunity to be a head coach at some point in his career. I also, personally, felt like going with Jim Schwartz was the wrong decision if we were to pick a head coach. So the question for me became, why was it Todd Monken over Sheil Haas and Udinski? Because again, those were the two guys that I kind of favored instead. And the simple question is this: Todd has a more proven track record. You know what you're going to get from him. He's proven that he can coach a top offense in the league. He has. And those guys, you just aren't sure. So while I will say I do still kind of lean towards I would have preferred a younger guy to grow with this group, knowing what Todd Monken's philosophy is about, knowing what he's been able to accomplish in the NFL as a play caller as well as in college, and how he's been able to develop players, I think it makes a lot of sense why they decided to hire Todd Monken.
So here's the thing. I hear all that, and with all due respect to Todd Monken, I hear he's a good offensive mind. He's a good coach. But at the end of the day, the Cleveland Browns are an absolute shithole on offense. The Cleveland Browns have no offensive line. The Cleveland Browns have no receivers. The Cleveland Browns don't know if they have a quarterback. The Cleveland Browns have a running back that was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. He was great. Quinshon Judkins had an amazing rookie year given the situation he was in, right? But at the end of the day, right, in this conversation that we're talking about here, as far as his resume, what he's done, why this is a good or bad decision, to me, Tristan, yes, Todd Monken should have been given a head coaching job previously, 100%. Now, sometimes things don't shake up that way, but in my opinion, to expect anything remotely close to any of his previous numbers, I think, is unbelievably flawed. I think, honestly, there's no other way to say it other than we don't have Lamar Jackson. We don't have the Ravens offensive line. We don't have Derrick Henry. We don't have these things. And Tristan, that ultimately, I know we're talking about resume right now, but ultimately, when in this discussion of, you know, the pros and the cons and the why he's here, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. The only way that I think that this makes sense is when it comes to the player development side of things. And I think ultimately ultimately we landed where we're at because Jimmy Haslam meddled, which is a much bigger problem. It's a much, much bigger problem. And we can get into that later. But as far as Todd Monken himself, yes, he's done incredible things. You know, as far as his game plans, his play calling, you know, he's done a lot of good things. Don't get me wrong. But do I Do I believe that the guy that is ultimately going to get the most out of Shedeur Sanders is Todd Monken? Hell no. Hell no. Do I think that the guy that is going to get out of whatever is left, assuming that this is all true when they try, with Deshaun Watson, do I think Todd Monken's the guy to get the most out of Deshaun Watson? I actually do. I think that is probably the best fit. And honestly, that's what scares the shit out of me. And I don't mean to take it this way, and I don't mean to be, so negative, but I think the context of, the stats, they're great. You cannot deny it. Those are facts, right? And we've seen firsthand how good the Baltimore Ravens have been year in and year out. But again, he's not bringing the Baltimore Ravens offense to Cleveland, Ohio. We have an unbelievable amount of repairs to be made on this football team, roster-wise. And at the end of the day, Tristan, to me, when I look at this hire and like you're saying, the college stuff, everything that goes into it, all of his, past, his history, even his time here. In my opinion, I think the reason why the Cleveland Browns made this hire, the reason why he was the coach when, I'm going to be honest, I don't think any of us thought he would be, is because he is the safe option. He's the safe option. You said it. Grant Udinski was 30 years old. He was younger. Nate Schiohouse was 32 years old. So that's a risk. And he gave Sean McVay a high five. So that makes him a great candidate. Those were risky guys. But Tristan, I asked the question here. I'm not seeing this perspective that it seems to be that we're so close. I don't see it at all. I see monumental change needed. And to me, this is, again, nothing against Todd Monken. This is not a shot at Todd Monken. This is not to be disrespectful to Todd Monken. This is a Band-Aid hire. This is a temporary coach hire. This is we need a guy who can come in and have structure. This is not going to be Freddie Kitchens. This is not going to be disorganization and, outright dysfunction to the public. This is going to be a more professionally ran team under Todd Monken. But what this does, and this is my opinion, what this does is it gives you basically a Jim Schwartz on the offensive side of the ball without the defensive side of the ball talent. And at the end of the day, Tristan, to me, again, this is just my opinion. If you disagree, disagree. I don't see the swing and the shift in this decision that the Browns are needing. I see this as we don't know what to do. We can't figure it out, so we're going to give it to the guy that we think has the best chance to do it. To me, I understand that decision. I get it. But the problem is that came from Jimmy Haslam. And Tristan, we sat here and we talked about what would it mean when Paul DePodesta is gone. And the one thing that I said, and I can't remember if you agreed with me or not, Andrew Berry remaining in Cleveland as the general manager was the best thing because he will be the only kind of counter voice. Because JW's going with everything Jimmy says. It's his son-in-law. You can't expect him to be anything other than a bootlicker. No disrespect. But Andrew Berry is the only one that's going to be able to sit there and say, no, Jimmy, I think it needs to be this way. And Tristan, if all reports are to be believed, and we don't know for a fact, but knowing the history, knowing how this has gone, it seems that we got to the point where, again, by all reports, Andrew Berry wanted Nate Schiohouse. They went over there on the plane, and this whole thing fell apart. And Jimmy Haslam decided that, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Jimmy Haslam wanted Jim Schwartz and Andrew Berry wanted Nate Schiohouse, and they settled on Todd Monken. It's kind of what I had been hearing. I don't know.
I had not heard that. And again, I don't know if this is coming from a source from like your inside. I have not heard.
No, I heard
around
this.
That.
I want to say it was Zach. Was it Jack? It was one of the athletic guys, I think. It was either Zach Jackson or Lloyd. I don't want to put anything, out there saying it's them, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Okay. So I will actually push back on that about that this was a pure not Jim Schwartz hire. We'll talk about that. A pure ownership decision. And there's 2 points that I can point to. The first one's a very simple point. Todd Monken, and we haven't addressed this yet, Todd Monken in 2019 was telling other coaches that the Cleveland Browns organization was a mess. And let me actually rephrase that, because he didn't say the organization. He said the coaching, the way the coaching was happening was a mess. And he specifically was talking about how they would game plan every week, and Freddie Kitchens, our play caller, would call stuff that was not part of the game plan. That was one of his biggest gripes, which, by the way, very understandable. Freddie Kitchens was a nightmare. Thank God that ended as quickly as it did. It needed to end. But the reason why I also don't think this is a purely ownership decision is because there is a very relevant story that I'm going to bring up here real quick. So in 2012, I don't know if you heard this or not. It's very possible you did. But in 2012, the Indianapolis Colts ended up having a situation come up where they had to ask their 59-year-old offensive coordinator to take over for the head coach. This offensive coordinator had some head coaching experience in college, but pretty much was a lifelong offensive coordinator. Did not really have any opportunity as a head coach candidate. Pretty much was just a guy that hid in the shadows, similar to how Todd Monken has been. He then led that Indianapolis Colts team to a 9-3 record, and he was somebody who, previous to that point, was viewed as too old for the job. Derek, do you know who that guy was?
No, but I have a similar story I want to share after you're done with this.
Okay. That guy was Bruce Arians. Mm-hmm. And then Bruce Arians then went on.
So glad you just brought that up. Okay.
Yes, cool. But that guy was Bruce Arians. And Bruce Arians then went on to have a really successful coaching career in Arizona, which, as a team and organization that understands dysfunctional, you can look at Arizona and say the same. On top of that, which I believe at one point we actually had the opportunity to hire him and we passed, which he then Kitchens. Later, we passed on him for Freddie Kitchens. He went to Tampa and he won a Super Bowl. And by the way, looking back at it, obviously a horrible decision. Yes, and I have a feeling that's what you were going to bring up. But the reason why I mentioned that story, the 2012 Bruce Arians story, was not just simply to talk about Bruce Arians. It was also to mention the fact that Andrew Berry was a scout within the Colts organization at that time. Andrew Berry was there, and he had an up-close experience with this. So, yes, I still think that it's very possible that the best upside hire absolutely would probably have been Grant Udinski in my case. That's who I probably would have put. But at the same time, Todd Monken, absolutely. He's had a similar type of path as Bruce Arians, where really long time respected offensive coordinator who just never really got an opportunity. And I'll push back as well on the point that you made about Lamar Jackson and all these weapons and such. And it's simply this: Greg Roman couldn't get what he got out of that team. And in particular with the passing attack, Baltimore's been crying out for a receiver for years, man. That's something that we know firsthand, obviously, but that's something that they've been asking for years. Now, Zay Flowers has developed into that. But who developed him, Derek? That's my question. And I think that answer is very obvious as well. That was Todd Monken. Todd Monken had found a way to get the most out of Zay Flowers. He had Isaiah Likely come along, who has been really good for Baltimore. He's gotten a lot of really great things out of Mark Andrews. He's gotten an incredible amount out of Derrick Henry at his old age. Like, he's gotten so much out of him. And he got the most out of the most important position, which is Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's best career years came under Todd Monken's tutelage. And you can say, well, that's just because of his age. That's just because of this, that. But all these other guys had that boost in performance. And you mentioned the offensive line, that it's not the Ravens' offensive line. And yes, I agree. But at the same time, he led an offense that, not this past season, but the last year, was the first in total yardage with Daniel Falele as a starting guard. Brother, we think we know bad offensive guards, right? That guy takes the cake. Oh my goodness. The fact that his offense put up the number one total amount in total yards with Daniel Falele as a guard, as a starting guard, is an incredible accomplishment. Incredible accomplishment. But regardless, to say this, I get why this feels like a Jimmy Haslam hire, but I don't think that Jimmy Haslam would have gone out of his way to hire somebody who has trashed his organization. I don't think that he would have done that. His ego would have stepped in the way. I don't think that this is somebody he would have went after. Additionally, I think Andrew Berry has an experience with Bruce Arians to not look at age as a contributing factor, because even if your first time being an NFL head coach is 60 years old, you're still capable of winning a Super Bowl. Even though it's incredibly rare, it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is I'm not his age is like my least concern, to be honest with you. I never mind. I'm not going to say that, but it's not that big of a deal. I'll be honest. It's really not.
Yeah.
Now, a couple things here. The Bruce Arians side of this, right? Absolutely. Very similar. Great story. That's the best case scenario. And I don't mean to be so negative, but we have to do both sides here. And the worst of it is David Culley, who very similar to kind of a Todd Monken story. Somebody who was an out of nowhere hire pretty much for the Houston Texans. Similar, I mean, it's not apples to apples, but similar. Didn't really get a whole lot of like big time looks. Culley spent 1 year in Houston and went 4-13. And here's the thing. Bruce Arians, first of all, it's funny you bring that up because it's crazy. Hindsight's 2020, but if the Cleveland Browns would have hired Bruce Arians instead of Freddie Kitchens in 2018, boy, where are we today?
Dude, he grew up a Browns fan.
Yeah, he grew
up a Browns fan. He wanted this job. Like, he would have passed. Like, if the New England Patriots had fired Bill Belichick and had Tom Brady roaring and ready at the wheels, and they wanted him and only him, and they were going to give him whatever he wanted, he still would have taken the Browns job over it. I'm convinced. He loves the Cleveland Browns. He loves them, and we spat in his face and said, no, Freddie Kitchens.
Oh. Yeah. And ultimately, I might be jumping the gun here, but since you brought that up, I'm going to throw this real fast. Excuse me. I'm getting over being sick, by the way. I forgot to say that at the start of this thing. So I apologize. But yeah, when it comes to, the whole age thing, this is why I say it's not an issue for me, right? He's going to be 60 years old. He signed a 5-year contract. If that finishes, he's going to be 65, which is not that crazy. It's not crazy at all, especially let's get real crazy here for a minute. If you believe in the Haslam conspiracies with trying to lure Nick Saban out of retirement and try to bring him to Cleveland, if you're one of those people, which I'm not, by the way, I don't think that's going to happen or even remotely true, but if you're one of those people, right, you can't sit here and say, oh, he's too old. No, it's not the age thing. Where the age thing is a problem is with Jim Schwartz. That is where it becomes a problem. Because when you are going through, again, I'm probably jumping the gun here, forgive me, but when you're going through this whole process, right, and we're seeing the list of names, and you're seeing, the Grant Udinskis, 30 years old, Nate Shieldhouse, 30-something years old, they interviewed Jesse Minter. A lot of these young guys that we kind of identified as, the potential next guys, right? A lot of those names were on the list. We didn't see like Brian Flores. We didn't see, Bob Sala. We didn't see those type of guys.
I don't know how extensive his coaching his coaching resume is, but I think our very first interview was Greg Halfley. I want to say he's been coaching for a while. Sorry, Jeff Halfley. I thought it was Greg. My bad. But I'm pretty sure he's been coaching for a while. I think he's older. I could be wrong.
He is not.
No?
He is not.
No, he's not?
Jeff
Am I thinking of the wrong guy then?
Jeff Halfley was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State for 1 year, and then he went to Boston College to be a head coach.
Okay.
And his defense was really good. And Kerry Combs came after him, and Kerry Combs was the worst defensive coordinator I have ever seen in Columbus, Ohio. Holy shit. I like Jeff Halfley a lot. His haircut sucks. He needs to get rid of that flat top. I don't know. We're getting off track here, but point being is when you see the list of candidates, right, and you look at the situation the Browns are in, you have one side of the ball that is elite, and then you have one side of the other side of the ball that is beyond terrible. I'm the worst offense in the NFL 2 years in a row. I've said it damn near every time we've gotten on this podcast, right? And that's why you fired Kevin Stefanski. So it made sense. It made sense, some of the names that we were hearing. And like you said, the one name that was kind of like, okay, was Todd Monken. It was the one that nobody even gave a thought to it because it seemed so far-fetched. And ultimately, the age factor with Jim, get this out of the way. He has every right. He has every right to do what he did. I think I would have done the exact same thing, to be honest with you. And not even the fact that they went with a different candidate. It's one thing if they go with a younger guy, an offensive mind, an up-and-comer. They went with a guy that is around his age. They basically said, no, Jim, we don't want you. We want you on the offensive side of the ball. That is where the problem lies with the age thing. His age being 60, it's not the end of the world. Could this job be a quote-unquote retirement plan? If it doesn't work out, and he's got the whatever and he can go be a coordinator, sure, maybe. But that's not what you got to think about here. When it comes to this hire, when it comes to this hire, you have to think about where we were, how did we get to that point, where we are now, and where we're going. How we got to this point, Tristan, I don't know if you're ready to get into the process or not, but how we got to this point fucking sucked. It was the most embarrassing joke of professional sports being ran that I think I've seen in a long time. It is nothing short of embarrassing.
Okay. Yeah, real quick before we do get into that, and then we absolutely can. I did want to bring up a stipulation when it came to David Culley. David Culley, throughout his entire career, had been primarily a wide receivers coach, assistant head coach. Those were like senior offensive assistant. Like those were kind of the roles that he had. The only time prior to being the head coach of the Houston Texans that he was at an offensive coordinator or higher role, so offensive coordinator specifically, the only time he had been at that level was when he was at UTEP from 1989 to 1990. He was not calling plays. he was a receivers coach. He was, with the Ravens in 2019, 2020. He was the roles that he had. This is where he got hired from: assistant head coach, wide receivers coach, and pass game coordinator. That was his title. Not a full on offensive coordinator. So that's a little bit of a. I think that's a bit of a some context is needed for that. But I hear what you're saying, though, in terms of your point is it's not a gimme that, oh, you're gonna hire this guy who's older. That means that you're gonna have a Bruce Arians. It's not a 1-for-1. And then I will talk about that point that you mentioned about the fact that Schwartz got picked over by a guy that's like his age on the other side of the ball. I will get back to that point, but I think it's best that we do kind of go through this process, and I'll give you my answer to that towards the end there. So I'll let you kind of run us through. How did we get here, Derek?
Well, before anything, I think it's important to bring up this was a 23-day coaching search. 23 days. Now, the reason why I bring that up is not to say, wow, they put all this time and effort and energy into getting this one right. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is when you look at the vast majority of these teams, right, a lot of these teams got their coaching hires out early, which there's a reason you do that. The Senior Bowl is going on right now. You have to build staffs. Like this thing, it's not... Timing is very important. That's kind of the big thing I want to say here. Timing is very important when you're making these hires to get things in place, right? It's not everything, but it's important. And like I said, the Browns had a laundry list of names. The vast majority of them were of the young offensive mind category, which is what every report we had seen coming into the offseason. The Browns are looking for an offensive mind, and the term young offensive mind was used a lot, right? That's not me saying it. That's, just kind of the overview that was brought up, right? So how do we get to this point? This is one of those things that, Tristan, everybody has a different opinion on. I'll give you my opinion, and then I'll ask you yours before we continue. A lot of people look at the coaching drop-offs and the withdrawing their name from consideration as in they were not going to get the job. I think that certainly is the case for a couple of them, but I think it's real fucking cute that we pretend like that's all of them. I think it's real funny that we pretend like it's all of them. And now, again, this is all opinion. This is my opinion. I'm not saying that, I've heard this or I have fact to back it up. This is just me looking at how it's gone and the whole thing. The notion of you have to keep Jim Schwartz as your defensive coordinator, I don't think that was like as strong as people were saying. I do think it was a heavy suggestion, and I do think that played a part in it. I think it made a lot of people uncomfortable. And ultimately, at the end of the day, yeah, I think people decline the Cleveland Browns because we're a joke. That is what I believe. Now, not everybody. I'm not saying everybody. But, do I think a Mike McDaniel, for example, do I think he withdrawed his name because he knew he wasn't getting the job? No, I don't. I think it was a mix of he's been here before, he's seen how things go, those sort of things. So, whatever. You can think of that what you will. Tristan, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that?
I think with McDaniel, I think it was half and half. Like, I think he knew that he wasn't getting the job. Honestly, I do. Just because I think it was two parts. So I think he knew that he likely was not getting the job, and he was primarily there. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure he was potentially a candidate that would satisfy the Rooney Rule, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that was more so the impression that he got, that was the main reason why he was in the interview process. But also, I think that it was partially just because of the fact that on the offensive side of the ball right now, unless you have a guy come in that is excited about what you have in your quarterback room, there's nothing really about the rest of this team outside of Fannin and Judkins, which I will say there's very odd similarities, that Judkins is a very similar play style, not player, but play style to a Derrick Henry. You've got Harold Fannin, which with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, there's a lot of receiving threat between there. And then Todd Monken wanted to draft Shedeur Sanders when he was with the Ravens. So that's why I think the job was more attractive to Todd than it would have been Mike, because Mike McDaniel would have been looking at it like, why would I put myself in for the Browns job if I don't have a quarterback that I like there? The offense is already that big of a mess, and I could just end up getting either the Raiders job, which I'll be guaranteed the first overall pick, Fernando Mendoza, or I will work with Justin Herbert. And I think that that's what he was looking at, was how do I become a winning head coach sooner? And I think that he probably looked at it and said, the Browns, it's not an immediate turnaround. It's not something that I can work with. And fair enough. But it very well could have also been his own experience within the organization, because when he was here, there was a lot. I'm not saying that it's not tumultuous now, but it was way worse then. I think we can both agree on that.
They quite well, first of all, Kyle Shanahan wrote a presentation on why he wanted to get out of Cleveland. Situation not apples to apples, but kind of similar to Schwartz, where it's like he's still under contract, so they'd have to, whatever. It'd have to work out. Who helped him write that? Mike McDaniel helped him write his reasonings for getting out of Cleveland. So, yeah. It's safe to say he is well versed in the dysfunction in Cleveland, which, by the way, it is hilarious. I still laugh at Jimmy Haslam, getting mad at people bringing up, about the dysfunction point. I think that is the funniest thing in the world. Like, you get mad at people asking, is this a dysfunctional whatever, and then you have the process we just had. Like, read the room, man. Look in the mirror. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Jimmy Haslam was a part of this process 100%. And I think take away the fact that it is Haslam, and this is just in fairness across all the organizations in the NFL, an owner is going to have a say in their head coach in any organization. So you have to have your owner, your if it's your GM or your like president of football operations, and then your coach. You have to all have them all on the same page, all with very similar thoughts. Those are the things that you're looking for. So that I kind of want to also address is, because it is Jimmy Haslam, rightfully so, there has to be more questions asked about it, because he has a history that we are very well known of. But the fact that he had a say in this process, that itself is not abnormal. It's just, what was his say?
No, and I'm not saying it was abnormal. Yeah. That's not my problem. My problem is your GM came in, assuming all the reports are to be believed as they are said, which we're going to find out a lot more about this as time goes on, but assuming things are that Andrew Berry wanted Nate Schiehlhaus and Jimmy Haslam was more focused on keeping Jim Schwartz, and they ended up on Todd Monken under those guidelines, if that is the truth, then this quite literally was the worst way this could have played out, because you get your quote-unquote compromise candidate as your head coach, and the reason for it says fuck you and leaves. And now we haven't even brought this up yet, and I'm sorry. I know I'm being really negative, but the fact that your best player, who just spent all of last offseason bitching, trying to get off the team, posted the Popeyes worker picture.
Yeah.
Like, this has been a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
And blame who you want, but Jimmy Haslam is the final man at the top. So
yeah, exactly. And you've said it before, like, we don't know that process exactly. And listen, if it played out like that and this was what happened, then yeah, this is obviously not the right call. And 1,000%, I'm gonna stand with you in that sentiment. I don't necessarily fully believe that. I want to touch on a point that you mentioned, which was that you had mentioned before. Oh my goodness, it's slipping. Wait, can I get it back? Oh, it was about. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this. All right, I'm gonna move on. I'm sorry. Was it about Schwartz? You know, I'll get on to my point about Schwartz. There's something else that you had mentioned that I wanted to say I agreed with. But if I think about it, I'll just say it. But with Schwartz, something I want to address is this. If we would have hired Shieldhouse, if anything, I think he would have been more angry. And part of the reason why is because I think he understood this was his last chance. This was his last chance to get a head coaching job. And listen, I'm not saying he's wrong for his reaction, as well as what he was saying in the building prior to a decision. I am not saying that is wrong, because quite frankly, he's a really good coach, and he is also worthy of having that amount of respect, and he deserves that respect. So with him this was reported that prior to a decision being made, he was telling coaches in the building, hey, if I'm not hired, I'm gone, right? That was the sentiment that was in the building. I think that was the case even if Shieldhouse was in there. And I think he would have been even more angry because, yet again, another stereotypical young offensive mind is the hire, passing over an older guy who's been in the league, who's been doing it. The biggest reason, which sucks for Jim, is this time it wasn't just the fact that it was a young offensive mind. It was an older offensive mind, which I think he can actually respect, because they didn't cut out a candidate because of their age, which I think shows that they actually considered him. But the reality is a lot of these coaches, it's younger guys. Whether it's right or wrong, it's younger guys. And I think that he could look at that and say, you know what, it wasn't just another young guy. They went and they got somebody who they felt like was the best offensive mind for the job, regardless of age. And that's where I think he could end up being a little bit in favor of that decision. But at the same time, yeah, because there's a lot of great older defensive minds that haven't had an opportunity, and it sucks. And he deserves to get an opportunity.
Let me ask you this.
I'll let you jump in. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because this is the big caveat to everything we're talking about right now. How did the Browns brass, meaning everybody that went into this decision, how did they treat Jim Schwartz prior to the head coach announcement being Todd Monken? Because if they treated it as if like, hey man, we really like you, we want you to stay, like we believe in you, you know, and it's already been known, Miles, Denzel, they were all advocating for him. Like, if we know the players were very pro Jim Schwartz, or at least defensively. If the organization, if it is true that Jimmy and D and whoever else was involved was very much keeping Jim Schwartz on a string, you know, if that is true, I guess my question would be, which scenario, other than Jim Schwartz getting the job, does he stay?
I don't think there is one. Actually, I think that this was potentially the only scenario in which he could stay. Because I think you can look at it and say this, and this was a point that I wanted to bring up earlier. If we had brought in Jim Harbaugh, Todd Monken was going to be our OC. And we would have... Sorry. Fuck, I do that all the time. If we would have hired John Harbaugh, Todd Monken would have been our offensive coordinator, right? And so the fact that we brought in Todd Monken to coach our offense, well, for a lot of fans, that was plan A anyway. So, yes, is it an elevated role? It's not John Harbaugh. Yes, and I get that. There is a big difference there. But in terms of the impact on the offensive side of the ball, that was going to be Todd Monken. The reason why I say this is potentially the only opportunity where Jim Schwartz could come back is, again, that same sentiment that this isn't just another copy-paste hire. And I don't think that Jim will come back. Let me preface this with that.
You can't let him come back. You can't. It'll be a civil war inside that locker room. It'll be offense versus defense, because the minute something goes wrong, half of those players are going to be saying Jim should have been the coach.
I don't know about that. I don't know. They're professionals, and at the end of the day, if whether it was Jim that was hired as the head coach or Schilhaas or whatever, I think you'd have that anyway, even if Jim wasn't in the building. If this team would have lost games early, or if this team goes on to lose games early next year, even if Jim Schwartz isn't in the building, those players that would say that anyway. So that's, I don't think that you can make, and I hate to word it like this because it sounds like I'm like hating on the guy, or that it's kind of like a disrespectful thing, because it's not. Jim did kind of try to strong arm himself into this role. He did. Like he went to coaches.
Agent.
Yeah. Like they like there were he tried to tell all these coaches in the organization that if this happens, then this is what's going to happen. So personally, I think this was always going to be his reaction if he didn't get chosen over. And Derek, you and I both agree that wouldn't have been the right hire. It would not have been the right hire. And as much as we love Jim Schwartz, right, hiring him as the head coach, while yes, it keeps our defense good, the offensive side of the ball, there's a lot of players that need developed. There's a lot of you need to be able to get the best out of a lot of those players. And having a play caller come in to do that, this is not an attractive job for an offensive coordinator. Absolutely not. We would not. There would probably be guys that would rather be a pass game coordinator or a run game coordinator for another team instead of being the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. And so for me, that kind of pushed me to a point where you have to hire an offensive guy. So you have to have an offensive hire at head coach. I think that was honestly the position that we were strong-armed into because of our personnel. But I say that to say this, and I don't think that Schwartz does come back, but I do see a way in which he comes back as the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. And I could see a way in which there is an agreement amongst him and Todd, because again, they're each going to lead their own side of the ball. And I don't have this feeling that, again, and I don't think that this is going to end up happening. I think the most likely outcome is that Schwartz and the Browns agree to mutually terminate his contract. He ends up probably going to like San Francisco. But regardless, the prospect that if Schwartz does come back, there's going to be a civil war, I don't see that. I don't. If anything, yeah, I don't know. I personally don't see that. I think it would happen anyway.
I don't know, man. It's so hard to say because it's not really fair to look at past situations and kind of forecast it onto this current situation. But I think about, like, when Jadeveon Clowney was being a problem in the locker room, and they kept holding on to him on this roster for weeks when they should have cut him. Things like that causing an issue in the locker room. The Baker OBJ situation absolutely caused a divide in the locker room. And, for me, Tristan, I judging by how this hour-long conversation has gone so far, I would fair to say you strongly disagree with what I'm going to say. I think Jim Schwartz would have been a much better hire than Todd Monken for the morale and for the future of the Browns. I actually, this is going to cause whatever debate, maybe unfair, whatever. I think this is the worst decision for the future of the Browns. And again, I don't mean that as like to be disrespectful. I like Todd Monken. I do. I love him as a guy. I think he's great, but I also loved Freddie Kitchens. And I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing at all. I'm not saying that at all. But
yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. I have to clarify with this because Todd Monken is a proven not head coach, but he's a proven coach. Mm-hmm. And he won 2 national championships with Georgia. He coached a really, really good offense with the Ravens. That's just in recent history. He did a good job in Tampa when he was there. Mm-hmm. He did some good things in college, like leading up to that opportunity. So this is not Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens fucking like drunkenly fell backwards out of a screen door into this opportunity. Like that's what it was. This is a completely different CB.
Don't forget the Pittsburgh sucks shirts and all of that.
Yeah, no.
I fucking hate this team, man. Can I get that out of the way? I fucking hate the Cleveland Browns. I hate that I love them, and I hate that I have to put up with this shit. I fucking hate it. I hate it all the time. Constantly. Yeah. Constantly.
The other thing I will also mention is a lot of people in this fan base, and I think you're one of them as well, wanted a head coach that was going to keep players accountable. Todd Monken's going to do that. He's going to do that. He mid-season, actually I think it was towards the end of the season, called out Lamar Jackson for missing a day of practice. Mm-hmm. Your offensive coordinator to the public media called him out because he missed practice. Like that's so ballsy. Your franchise quarterback, like that's if you want a guy that's going to hold players accountable, man. Like he's a walking demonstration of that. That's what we were hoping for the next head coach. Was not a Kevin Stefanski kind of guy that's not gonna say what he means. Todd Monken's gonna do that.
But again, leadership comes in different forms. And I'm not saying, I mean, you're right. You're 100% right. Like, he will. And that's the thing. This will not be disorganized. The Browns are not going to have 50 offensive, offsides penalties. Like, this is not going to be a disorganized team. But I would argue that that doesn't work with everybody. It doesn't. And to do something like that, you do have to have some pull inside of the locker room. And I feel like he could do that with Lamar. And I'm not saying he can't do that here. I'm just saying this idea, I think there's a lot of people that have this idea, and I'm not saying you're one of them. I'm just saying generally. I think there's this idea a lot of people think you're getting a guy that's going to come in here and he's going to lay the law down and he's going to turn this offense from being 32 into being 10. No. In all reality, I mean, if you can correct me if you feel differently, but I think it's more than likely that the Browns go from, being, I don't know where we ended up, but I'm going to assume like 30.
In terms of offense, I think it was 31. The Titans were the only one worse. That was the last time I checked. If I had to guess, it was probably that.
Yeah. So I think it's more than likely that the Browns go from 31 to probably around 20, probably, in terms of offense. So, I just... I can't believe that we're here. to be honest with you. Like, if you just take everything out of it, take how you feel, whatever you think of it, I cannot fucking believe that this is where we're at. Because, Tristan, I'm going to be honest with you, man. Like, and you'll probably disagree with me on this, but if you were to ask me at the end of the season, would you rather, ride it out next year with Kevin Stefanski, or would you rather have Todd Monken? I would say Kevin Stefanski. Absolutely.
That makes one of us.
Yeah. And that's fine. A lot of people... This is a very controversial hire. Like, the opinions are all over the board.
Yeah.
So I'm not faulting anybody if they feel differently.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's completely different because, yes, is the personnel on offense bad? 100%. You're not going to convince me it's not. But there are some things you can control and some things that fall on coaching. First play of the game against who was it? It wasn't Minnesota. Who was it against? It was first play of the game. We were backed up. I think it was the Bears game. Yeah, Bears. First play of the game. Quarterback doesn't have his plays on his wrist, right? And his communications in his helmet aren't working. Okay. Right? That's the very first snap of the game, that game. And that was inside the 5 because defense. Yeah. Now you know what I'm talking about. Yes.
I was thinking the Jets. In my head, I'm like trying to remember this, and I'm seeing Jets. But no, you're right. It was in Chicago. Yeah.
It was in Chicago. Second play of the game. False start. We're already inside our own 5. Yes. The Browns had way too many pre-snap penalties, which absolutely is an indication of coaching. 1,000% is an indication of coaching. A lot of errors. Guys who are giving up on plays too early. You saw that specifically. Cedric Tillman had a couple where he was running down the sideline, gave up on a play as the ball was flying over his head. That's a coaching issue. Even if you think that's a player attitude, it's a coaching issue because you let him play in the game. The disorganization amongst the offensive line, guys missing assignments versus just getting beat simply one-on-one. Missing assignments is a coaching issue. There were a lot of coaching issues with what was happening on the field. And Derek, maybe this is very ignorant of me to say this, but I still think that there's a slight chance that Shedeur could be a good quarterback in the league. And if we were ever going to figure that out, Todd Monken's the best guy to figure that out with, amongst who was available this offseason. Kevin Stefanski, we were not going to get that answer. We simply were not. I also think that Todd Monken gives Isaiah Bond as much of an opportunity as possible. Think about what he did with a player like, what's his name? Boston College wide receiver. I just talked about Zay Flowers. Yes, Zay Flowers. Harold Fannin. Like, he's had success with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Like, Derrick Henry. He's got Quinshon Judkins. Like, these young players that are already prominent features of our offense. Todd Monken has run an offense with players similar play styles. Not saying they're the same caliber yet, but we feel very high about those guys. So if we're going to bring somebody in this offseason, I wouldn't have stuck with Kevin Stefanski because I already know from what I've seen, he's not been able to develop wide receivers. He's not the guy that's going to get the most out of Shedeur Sanders. We might as well bring in a guy who at least wanted to draft Shedeur Sanders and also has been proven to elevate guys' play at those other positions. So for me, I would have taken Todd Monken over Kevin Stefanski. That doesn't necessarily mean this is a home run hire. There absolutely is risk. And I'm not saying what I'm saying to say this was the perfect hire and that I don't have issues with the hiring process, because I do. I definitely do. But Todd Monken as a coach, I get why the hire was made, and I think there's things to look forward to, and I'm excited to see what happens. Okay, so I guess to kind of bring this more down to earth, I guess, to make it more black and white. Yeah. Because I have my number, so I'm curious, and this is way, way too early. I want to get that
Want to get that out of the way first. But, Tristan, if I were to ask you today, it is January 31st, 2026. If I had to ask you what our record is at the end of next year, what would you say? Like, what would you put your money on?
Is this with Jim Schwartz calling the defense or without?
Oh, without.
Because that does matter.
He's not
without.
Gonna
Okay,
He's
I
not
figured.
gonna be
Without Jim Schwartz, I still think we got a lot of talent on that side. I still think that would require at least a step back. But I think Todd, it's hard to say for sure without knowing what moves we make in the offseason. Like, how does he value and how does the front office value the wide receiver need? How do they value the offensive line needs? Like, it's really, really hard to say. So I'm going to give you a range, which I hate doing, but I'm going to give you a range. I say anywhere from 5 to 9. 5 to 9 wins. Okay. I could see. It's way too early to say for certain, but like if they go out and with like their first pick, they get like I don't know, like Carnell Tate or the Miami tackle Maui Noao, who regardless, and one of them ends up performing well, which I know we're both at least high on Tate. But regardless, if they fix the tackle issues, they find some gems along the offensive line, then they go out and get a legit number one wide receiver, and also bring in a coordinator that is competent on the defensive side of the ball. This is going to be a good team. Like it's not going to be, when I say good team, I mean around 500. Like it's not going to be absolutely atrocious, right? But it depends on how they attack this offseason. So it's too early to give a narrow prediction. So, but yeah, I think somewhere between 5 and 9 wins is where I'm looking at.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that because when I did an immediate reaction, that 20-minute whatever, that's what I said. I think in Todd Monken's time, a little bit different. I said in Todd Monken's time in Cleveland, you will not eclipse more than 9 wins. I think you're going to get anywhere between 5 and 9 wins a year with Todd Monken. For me, next year, I think we're a 6-win team. Thank you, Tori. I think they heard you. All right. But this situation is just not good, and it's not good from the start. You are like, that's the thing. From the very beginning, and none of it is Todd Monken's fault at all. None of it is. But from the very beginning, he has been put into a situation where he's going to have to answer for a lot of different things. He's going to have to answer for Miles's response to it. He's going to have to answer for Jim Schwartz. Whether if he's tied to him or not, he's going to have to face the questions about it. And I do think he's more than capable of handling it. Like, he is a absolute professional, and he's going to be able to handle it. And that's what I like about him the most, to be honest, because we're going to have a lot to talk about with these post-game pressers from Todd Monken.
Yeah, we are. And I just want to chip in here real quick. I'm going to let you keep on going because I like where you're going with this. I will say, while I would have preferred Grant Udinski or Nate Scheelhaus, if this was going to be the effect no matter what, I kind of am happy that it's Todd Monken dealing with it and not one of those guys. Because to have your first ever time running an offense, let alone a team, and you get that too, brother, that's tough. But I think Todd Monken's more well-equipped to deal with it. But I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, 100%. When it comes to that side of things, absolutely. Now, what his relationship will be with Andrew Berry in the front office, I have no idea. Tristan, when we over the last couple of years when we've talked about things and what we would do and how they're going to do it, in my head, I feel like it was decently easy to kind of guess where they're going to go because you kind of know where it flows, right? I don't know how Todd Monken's going to work with Andrew Berry. I don't know how he's going to work with Jimmy Haslam because he could very well walk in and be like, you guys are idiots. This is wrong. And good. He might be right. Like, that may be what we need. Who knows? But the point that I'm trying to make in this whole thing is because of the process, because of how we got to this point, Todd Monken, day one, is behind the 8 ball here. Absolutely. Now, when it comes to the roster construction and the things that are most important here, like quarterback. I do think it is a little bit overblown. The video of him and Shedeur, people were like, yeah, see, he's QB1. No. Don't get ahead of yourself. Now, do I think he likes Shedeur Sanders? Sure, but he was planning on drafting him to be a backup quarterback in the 4th, 5th round. So, no, I'm not going to get super excited about that. Now, his development, that is totally different. I do think Todd Monken, would be good for Shedeur Sanders' development, which is why when they interviewed Todd Monken, I was decently okay with the fact that they were interviewing him because I thought they were bringing him here to be an offensive coordinator again. That's what I thought. And, my opinions and where I'm coming from on all of this is I'm not mad. Like, people, you probably hear all these things and you're like, oh, you're mad. You had somebody else you wanted and you're mad they didn't get him. No. Tristan, if we would have come on here and hired Nate Shieldhouse, I'd have been talking about how this is risky, but you have a chance to hit a home run, and it's a chance. If we would have hired Jim Schwartz, where's my Bible? Hand on the Bible. Had we hired Jim Schwartz, because there was a report coming out, right, late in this whatever process, there was a report that Jim Schwartz was gaining steam. And I was fully prepared to come on here, Tristan, and say, I think it's a lazy hire. I think it's a kind of an effortless hire, but at least it wasn't Monken. And I know that sounds, whatever, and disrespectful, crazy. It is what it is. But that is what I was going to say. And I feel bad because I feel like I'm shitting on Todd Monken. I'm not. I'm more so shitting on the Browns because if Todd Monken right now got the head coaching job for, let's just say, the Giants, right? Had John Harbaugh not gotten that job and Todd Monken gotten that job, I would be much more confident in him to at least be a solid head coach. I think this is going to be a disaster. I'm going to be honest. And I know there's a lot of people who probably will disagree with me. I think this is going to be a disaster. I think there's going to be a lot of poles of power from multiple different directions. And I don't know how this shakes up. I really don't. My thing, Tristan, sorry, I know I'm rambling here. The one thing that I keep trying to make a note of is 2029. They have a new stadium. That is what they care about. Whether if we like it or not, that's what they care about. I'm not saying they don't care about winning, but they are looking at that stadium. And if you think I'm wrong, then you don't know billionaires because they look at return on investment. And the only way he's going to get a return on that investment is if there's a good football team going in that stadium. And to me, Tristan, this was risky, but the safest risky pick they could have made. If that's a decent way of saying it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Yeah, so, but at the same time, I don't think that just because it could be viewed as a safe pick means that it's a wrong decision or it's a bad decision. So, like, I want to tie into one of the points that you brought up about Todd and analytics and how is that going to work with the analytics department. Todd Monken, I can't remember the exact, I was trying to find it, that's what I was scrolling for, but I couldn't find it, and it sucks, but he was presenting, and I don't know if it was at like a coaching conference. Oh, here we go. I actually got it right now. I think it was a coaching conference or at least a conversation about his philosophy with the Ravens and his offensive philosophy in its general. And he talked about how when he was in Tampa, the NFL really started to boost analytics. And his quote exactly was, and I love analytics because I love information. He favors analytics, and he has actually allowed analytics to dictate how his offense is conducted, what his strategy on offense is. And here are the 6 things in particular that he listed off. I don't know if you've seen this or not, Derek, but and it's going to start with the obvious: turnovers. A team that gets turnovers and doesn't turn it over. Everybody, whether you're analytical mind or not, yes, that's obviously the case. This is where it kind of starts to deviate. The second philosophy for him is explosive plays, which is driven by analytics. The more explosive plays you can get, more likely you are to have a successful offense and win games. Touchdowns in the red zone. So he mentioned in previous iterations of analytics, it was rush touchdowns in end zone, but whether it's a pass or a rush, doesn't matter. As long as it's a touchdown when you're in the red zone. Limiting lost yardage plays. Third down conversions is a huge one for him. And then the last one, which I thought was where I thought this was the point where I could understand why he wanted Shedeur Sanders and why the Browns thought if we are going to get Shedeur Sanders, this could pan out. His very last thing in dictating his offensive ability or his offensive philosophy, QB off-schedule explosives. And he in particular talked about how the most effective play that he runs, and he talks about the need for a quarterback that's mobile. He talked about how the most effective play in his playbook, the most called play, is quarterback scramble. And the reason for that is because if a play breaks down, quarterback's going to scramble. And he noted how across a I believe at that time it was a 16-game season, quarterback scramble was technically called. Yeah, I smacked my mic, my bad. Technically called, he said 85 times. 85. And it allowed his offense to be more explosive, and it allowed them to limit lost yardage plays. So for me, when I look at Shedeur Sanders and I'm saying I need a guy who's going to get the most out of him, that's the type of thing I want as a philosophy for an offensive coach, a guy who wants explosive plays and who wants quarterbacks to make off-schedule explosives, whether it's with his legs or with extending the play and making a throw or running. And Shedeur's shown the ability to do both. So I think it could work, and I think it there's parts to it that connect that make sense.
Mm-hmm. So, an interesting question, and I'm not even. I mean, I got to think about my answer, so don't. This is not a setup. This is genuine, just off the dome, popped into my head. Yeah. Are you worried with Todd Monken? Obviously, we know he's got 1 billion years of experience, right? In various forms. Are you worried at the fact that, at least by all reports, the words hasn't come out of his mouth, but by all reports, he's going to be calling plays as well as head coach. Are you worried?
Oh, sorry.
What? No,
I thought you were asking, am I worried about that? No, go ahead.
Well, that's where I'm going. Are you worried that in his first time as an NFL head coach, some of the issues that we saw with Kevin, he couldn't delegate? Like, Kevin, God bless him, he's a great dude. Like, he seems like an awesome guy, and honestly, I did like him as a coach, but for the love of God, he could not delegate at all. All.
I have an answer for you, and that answer is I am not concerned, and I'll tell you why. Andy Reid calls his own plays. Sean McVay calls his own plays.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan calls his own plays. Those guys call their own plays because that's what they do and they're great at it. And they also can do that. They're so good that they can do that and they can manage the game. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things that do need to be delegated. Absolutely. He can't, every time that the offense comes to the sideline, have a conversation with the quarterback, have a conversation with the running backs group, the tight ends group, the low line, wide receivers group. Like, he can't do that. He has to have guys that are effectively communicating, right? he needs to always be on that sideline calling plays, communicating well and effectively. But I'm not worried about that with Todd Monken. As weird as that sounds, yes, he has not been a head coach, and he doesn't have a ton of head coaching experience. So, yeah, he might not understand exactly that responsibility in terms of like recency, how he's done it, but he's been around the game for so long. I trust he just naturally knows how to manage the game. I mean, he's been around John Harbaugh for so long. Like he was around Kirby Smart. Like he's been around really good head coaches before. I trust that I trust him to be able to call a competent offense, which number one we haven't had for a while. So even if we just get that, and there are some issues procedurally or like managing the clock, right? Like even just having a better offense is a step up from where we were. But because he's been around the game so long, I trust him to run, or sorry, not run, but I trust him to manage the game well. And I've kind of talked about it before, but I want to make this clear. Like the Giants didn't even interview any other offensive coordinators. John Harbaugh was dead set. He wanted Todd Monken, and he didn't even have anybody else come in for an interview. He didn't, nothing. There was no movement. And all of the assistants from Baltimore that everybody thought the Giants were going to bring over, they're coming to Cleveland. Like that's the thing that needs to be said is we would have loved a John Harbaugh hire, and he was in because we know what he is and we know what he would bring to the table. If that guy was willing to sacrifice not going out and bringing in an offensive coordinator to wait to see if the Browns would hire Todd Monken, I think that means he's a good coach. And I don't think that John would have went out of his way. Yeah. So like that's what I'm saying is I think by nature we're going to be in a better place, because I just don't think that Kevin Stefanski, I just think it got to a point where I don't trust him anymore. I don't trust him to call a good offense. I don't trust him to manage the game correctly. So I got to move on. I got to find somebody who can at least do one of those two things better. And I think Todd Monken can call a better offense than Kevin.
Fair enough. And I think, ironically, it's funny how things work. The two rivals now ultimately fell the same way. When it was going well, it was great, and when it wasn't, it was miserable. And Baker and Kevin both leave Cleveland kind of the same way. My thing is kind of, the where we go from here part. And we should probably wrap it up here soon. We're going on an hour and a half. But my thing is, I think the Cleveland Browns needed a massive swing of change. Massive swing of change. To me, I don't think this is it, personally. I think there are a lot of positives. Of course there are. And that's the thing. That's why ultimately I hate saying things the way that I am, because it sounds like I'm just shitting on Todd Monken. Todd Monken is a proven, successful coach. He has been around football. Great. That's awesome. Congratulations. But this is not the same song and dance, as he's been doing. And Mike Pettin did an interview with UCSS, and he was talking about it and kind of, where he went wrong as a head coach. And he had made the point of, as the head coach, you are the one that is fair, unfair, responsible to put out the fires. And he said at the end of the day, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm trying to go off of memory, but he said something along the lines of he didn't realize that is how it was going to be. Do I think Todd Monken's going to be that way? No. I think Todd Monken knows kind of what he's getting into here, at least with that sort of thing. But when I look at this ship and where we're headed, and I think about how do we turn this thing around? Again, 4 times in 23 years have we been over 500. Do I think that Todd Monken is going to help bring a consistent level of winning to the city of Cleveland? I don't. I think what Todd Monken will do, and maybe this might be the best thing we need. Maybe we suck, like record-wise. Maybe the record's not great, but at the end of the day, maybe Todd Monken can be the guy to be the developer. We haven't had a developer. And maybe he's not a great coach. Maybe he's not a great head coach, but maybe he's a good developer, right? Maybe that's the case. But I don't know, man. I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself over and over, but
yeah, I can understand that. And I will say, I think that the ultimate, I think a part of this as well is like what dictates a lot of Todd Monken's success in Cleveland is a lot of stuff that's outside of his control. It's how does ownership and management handle this? Because I gotta say, if they give him at least 3 years, obviously barring any like largely tumultuous stuff, that's absolutely, he needs to be fired right away. If he gets 3 years, I think he gets us in a better spot than where we're at right now. Like I think if you're looking at him as a guy that, you know, can at a minimum develop your players and bring you stability, and you're saying like give him 3 years to do that, I think he's going to deliver on that. That's kind of like what I think about him. Now, is he going to be good enough to win you a Super Bowl? That's the issue, right? But at the same time, if you use him as like, we won't know if he's going to be that good, right? Because he's never been in this spot before. But what we can say from his time as a play caller and what he's done with elevating quarterback play, elevating the play of the guys around him, I think what we can confidently say is I think he has the opportunity, given enough time, he can bring stability, he can develop players, he can elevate players. And then if he's just not the guy, he'll leave the organization in a much better place than where it was, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, which is the most important. I hate to rule out defense like that because defense does win championships, but especially around the quarterback, you have to have stability. So, and if that's what we get from Todd Monken, then I think it's a mild success. So that's kind of how I view this. Whether it ends up being short-term because he just ends up not being good enough to win a Super Bowl, or whether it is long-term and he is. I think that he has the opportunity to, no matter what, leave the Browns, especially on that offensive side of the ball, in a much better spot.
All right. Well, I think I'm ready to wrap this up if you are.
Yeah. Whew, man.
My final.
This is the first time we disagree on anything, by the way.
Well, this is my final question because you brought it up last there. Again, this is crazy to say, but we have to say this at the start because at some point, and however many long, we're going to look back and say, well, you know, what did we think? My question to you, Tristan, is today, January 31st, 2026. How long is Todd Monken the head coach of the Browns?
I mean, it's crazy to say this, like, either like it's so hard because again, it's a lot outside of his control. I could see it being like less than a year or like 20 years. Like seriously, I really could. As crazy as that sounds. I'm going to say 4 years.
4 years.
I'm going to say 4 years. I think that they'll give him 3 to or at least 2 to change the offense and develop it. And then they'll give him at least 1 to actually try to go and win. I think that I'll say 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
My answer is 2. My answer is 2, and I think ultimately the reason, this is just my belief and my theory behind it, I think they think they're way closer than they are. I think they believe that. I think the first year we win 5-6 games. I think the next year we win, no jokes, 6 or 7 games. And I think they get to the point where they're like, okay, this is not, and we're in the same boat all over again. So that's just how I see it. I want to clarify. I hope I'm wrong. I want nothing more to be wrong. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but I just want to clarify. I don't want to sit here and bitch 24/7. I don't.
Yeah. I'll say this, and this is probably going to be a hot take. So I'll quickly say 2 points, and then I promise I'm done. Number one, part of me does like this hire because of the fact that it is so off the wall, so unexpected. Like, for so long it's been like football minds versus analytical minds, right? Like who's the favorite guy on each, right? And in this cycle, it was clear it was Schwartz and it was Schilhaas, right? In terms of the general consensus amongst that. I do kind of like the fact that we got this oddball Todd Monken, where he does use analytics, but his approach is kind of like what more of like the like holding people accountable type of guy. Like I do kind of like that this is. I like it from that perspective because it's unique and it's different. And I think in order to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, you got to be unique and different, because that's a huge task. But I will. This is my hot point here. So, if he's given a 4th year and he finishes out that 4th year, I think there's a very good chance Todd Monken's the head coach of the Browns for a decade.
Till he's 70?
Yeah, 70.
Okay.
Bill didn't walk away until he was 75.
All right.
Or, actually, I want to say it was 75. But regardless, if he can get through year 4, right, and is not fired in the mid or right after year 4, I think he's here for a decade. I know, it sounds insane to say.
We are
I
this is the most polar opposite I think we've ever been. I think we were closer on Will Levis than this. and I don't even say that as a joke. Like I'm telling you.
Like I'm not saying that to also say like I think that's what's going to happen. Like in reality, just because of what I know about ownership, I don't think that he gets more than 3 years. Just because I think that ownership's just not going to be comfortable sitting on their hands. With Kevin, it was different because we got to the playoffs twice. With this, it's probably going to be 3 years in a row of, at best, fighting to get in, or maybe we are able to get in as a wild card, but maybe one round win. Like this isn't going to be like it's going to be it's not going to be an immediate success, right? Like at least I don't anticipate it. Like, sure, is it possible, like, if we draft Carnell Tate and he ends up being a top 5 wide receiver, Shedeur Sanders ends up being a top 10 quarterback, and the offensive line, they rebuild it and it's perfect, and Jerry Jeudy comes back to what he was last year, it's possible. But this is likely going to be at least 3 years of building and developing.
I don't know, man. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. It'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating. Yeah. If it goes the way that I think it will, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, Browns fans, that this is where we're at again. But I hope I'm wrong.
And I don't think that people are wrong to feel that way, because it's like, when has it gone right? Like with Kev, even like it was like it half went right. Like you got some success, but like we want to compete for a Super Bowl, man. Like. We got close. We tasted one playoff victory. Like that, we need to strive for more than that. And I don't blame people for feeling like it's not going to happen, no matter who our head coach is, because we still have the same guy up top.
Well, I would push back on that, to be honest with you. I think if Nate. I hate that I'm going to do this, but had the hire been Nate Schilhaas, do I think in 2 years the Browns could be back in the playoffs? I feel better about that. Me personally.
Interesting. Okay.
So
I just think that, so I could say this. I think there's a greater chance that we win a Super Bowl. Yeah, I would say that there's a greater chance that we get a higher, I'll say this, a greater chance we get a higher, like, top 5 coach in the game with Schwesinger or Udinski instead of Monken. But at the same time, man, like, I just, yeah, it's hard to say, but I think that we're actually closer to being a playoff team with Todd Monken than one of those guys, because they've never called an offense, let alone ran a team. They've never ran an offense, let alone a team. So, like, that's going to take some adjustment, man. Like, it takes time. So, like, it's interesting. I think if we were in it for a longer term build, I think that Udinski or Schwesinger would have probably been the right pick. If we're looking to start being a 6+ win football team, or sorry, I'll say 7+ win football team starting like next year or the year after, then Monken was the guy.
All right, well, we'll see. That's the beautiful thing about this. None of it's in our control. So but
we'll see.
I don't even know how to end this. It's just kind of like, here we are. I mean,
pray for the best, man. That's all we can do.
I'll put it to you like this. This is how I'll end it. When talking about this with one of my coworkers, I said, this is how I describe this situation. I said, it's almost like that family member that just keeps getting themselves in trouble. Like, no matter what, they just keep getting themselves in situations. And eventually, you have to take your hands off and say, you know what? If it takes it, throw them in jail. Let them do some time. If that's what it takes for them to learn, let it be. And that is how I feel about this situation. Except the reverse is, instead of throw them in jail, it's, hey, Jimmy, pay more coaches to sit on their ass at home. You know, have more of your fan base just dying off. Like, there's no new Browns fans. No kids want to be Browns fans. Like, that's how I feel. So, we'll see. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I'm going to be a Cleveland Browns fan if we go 0-17 next year. And I don't think we will. I'm just saying. Like, that, it's not going to change. I'm still going to be a fan. But, I just, unfortunately, I see a lot of not great times ahead of us. So, that's just me. Yep. But here's to hoping, I guess.
Yeah. Here's to hoping.
Alrighty, everybody. If you're still watching, you're a psycho. So, go get yourself checked out. Yep. See ya.